Okay, today we're going to read John 7 and 8, and hopefully if we can get to it, chapter 9 as well. This is all part of the same series of events. This is occurring during the Feast of Tabernacles, which is in September. This is about 6 months. I presume it's the very next Feast of Tabernacles. We just got done reading in chapter 6 about an event, the feeding of the 5,000 and the fallout from that, which occurred before the Passover. This is the Feast of Tabernacles. The Passover is in March. Feast of Tabernacles is in September. I am assuming this is the next Feast of Tabernacles about 6 months later. And this would now put us about 6 months out from Jesus' crucifixion, which is going to occur at the next Passover the following March. There's a series of events that occurred here in John 7, 8, and 9 that all take place during this Feast of Tabernacles. As we read this, we are going to skip the last verse of chapter 7 and the first 11 verses of chapter 8, and we are going to come back and do those later because I don't believe those belong in this sequence. They are a different story that was inserted into this spot in the Gospel at some later point in time by some later editor, possibly even a couple of centuries after the book was written. And so we'll cover that. We will read that, but we're going to do that after we get done because it breaks up the flow of the rest of this sequence. And we have more to talk about that when we get there. So for now, we're just going to be reading through 7, 8, and 9. This is all occurred. The Feast of Tabernacles, by the way. Oh boy, I can't get started. Here she comes. I can't get started. I can't get even 2 minutes in before the cat decides she has to bother me. Can't do it. Can't be done. Cannot be done. The Feast of Tabernacles, was, of course, was one of the three main feasts that they celebrate every year, instituted way back in the days of the law, when in Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, when Moses gave them the law. There was Passover, there was Pentecost, which you don't hear a whole heck of a lot about, and then, of course, it plays a major role in the formation of the church, because that's when that happens. The first day of the church is the day of Pentecost that year. Pentecost was 50 days after Passover, and Tabernacles was in September, which was the harvest time for them. And Tabernacles celebrated their time in the wilderness that they spent after they came up out of Egypt and before they settled into their land. And the unique thing about the Feast of Tabernacles is that they all were supposed to live in temporary shelters or booths that they built for that week. They were supposed to come to Jerusalem, and they lived not in houses like they did in this day and time, but in temporary huts or tents or shelters like they did during their wilderness wanderings between coming out of Egypt and settling in the land. And it also represented how God himself had been with them, living in his tent, the tabernacle, with them, pitching his tents among them during that same time. And so that is the point of the Feast of Tabernacles, that it celebrates God's dwelling. I personally believe that Jesus was actually probably born during this feast. We assign December 25th as Jesus' birthday. It's not. I mean, there's nothing in the scripture indicating that. That's just something that we did at some point later on. But I personally believe that if there's any special significance in the actual day that Jesus was born, it was probably the day of Tabernacles, the Feast of Tabernacles. But the scriptures don't say that, so that's just my personal theory. If there was any significance to his birthday, his actual birth date, it was probably that. Anyway, so that's what's going on. And this was one of the required feasts. All Jewish men had to attend this. And Jesus is a Jewish man, so he is here for this. This is about, assuming this is all taking place sequentially, this is about 6 months after the previous material, which happened before the previous Passover. So, John chapter 7. After this, Jesus went around in Galilee, purposely staying away from Judea, because the Jews there were waiting to take his life. This is after the Passover. He will go back there again. He's going to go back there in this chapter. He's going to go back there in December for the Feast of Dedication. Okay, he's going to go back there. But the more every time he goes there, just the tension meter rises higher and higher until eventually it just can't take it anymore and he has to die. So he goes back to Galilee and ministers there for several months. But when the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles was near, which is 6 months later or so, Jesus' brothers said to him, "You ought to leave here and go to Judea, so that your disciples may see the miracles you do. No one who wants to become a public figure does so in secret, or acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world." For even his own brothers did not believe in him. I don't know if they're speaking sarcastically here, or if they are actually trying to give him genuine advice. If they acknowledge that he is acting like a Messiah figure, or someone who says he's the Messiah, they could be saying, "Okay, go to Jerusalem and prove it. Go out there and show yourself to the people in Jerusalem that you're the guy." They may be offering that as genuine, okay, this is what you should be doing if you really think you are this person, or they could be speaking sarcastically. I'm not really sure. Either way, they did not believe at this point that he actually was the Messiah. You read about this in the other Gospels too. They, at some point before this, actually came to try to take charge of him because they thought he had gone insane. I guess at this point they've given up trying to do that. This is 6 months before his crucifixion. So I guess at this point they've given up trying to stop him. So now they're either egging him on or just saying, "Okay, if you think you are the Messiah, act like a Messiah." I don't know, again, if that's genuine or sarcastic or what that is. But they seem to have given up the idea of trying to control him and stop him from acting. But they don't believe he actually is the Messiah yet. Again, that would be a tough thing to believe. I said before, but if my older brother, when he turned 30 years old, suddenly went on a mission and started acting like he was the Son of God, I would have had a hard time believing that. Okay? I would have. Like that would be a tough thing to believe about your own brother you grew up with in your own household. Therefore, Jesus told them, "The right time for me has not yet come." Not quite. It's getting there, but it's not there yet. For you, any time is right. The world cannot hate you. But it hates me because I testify that what it does is evil. One way to get people to hate you, one great way to get people to hate you, is to tell them that what they're doing is evil. They will hate you for that, okay? That is a surefire, I don't know if there is a more surefire way to get someone to hate you. They will hate you if you tell them that. Remember way back in 1 Kings, the end of 1 Kings, wicked King Ahab talked about some prophet he kept in prison and never wanted to listen to because he only ever said bad things about him. He said, "My soul hates him. I hate that guy." Like if you tell someone that what they're doing is evil, they will hate you. That person will hate you. That person could listen to you. It's unlikely it will happen right away. Maybe eventually you'll get through to them. But that is a great way to get people to hate you. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. Maybe it means you should do it with some tact and discretion, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should go picking fights. Jesus has been avoiding confrontation with the Judeans up until now. He will eventually go seek it out, but up until now he has been avoiding confrontation. So it doesn't mean you necessarily go looking for trouble, but it does mean that you maybe call out this evil where you see it with some discretion and wisdom. You go to the feast. I am not yet going up to the feast, and it says here in the footnote, some early manuscripts do not have the word yet. So he could be just saying I'm not going, or he could say I'm not going yet to this feast, because for me the time has not yet come. Having said this, he stayed in Galilee. However, after his brothers had left for the feast, he also went. He did go, not publicly, but in secret. Now, I'm assuming he is not lying to them when he says he's not going. I guess he just didn't want to go with them. He wasn't going to make a big public spectacle of himself like they wanted him to, or like they were saying he should. Apparently he did intend to go, or maybe at the very least he changed his mind. But he wasn't going to go in the manner that they were suggesting. Now, at the feast, the Jews were watching for him, so they figured he'd be there. Remember, these were required feasts. All Jewish men had to go to Jerusalem for these feasts. Jesus would have gone to each one of these. The other Gospels don't really indicate that, but I mean, he would have been there for this, and so they were expecting him to show up. So they were watching for him. Where is that man? And asking, where is that man? Where is he? Where is he? Bring him here so we can stone him. So we can introduce his face to our fists and throw some stones at his head. Among the crowds, there was widespread whispering about him. Some said, he is a good man. Others replied, no, he deceives the people. But no one would say anything publicly about him for fear of the Jews. That's pretty much still the argument about Jesus to this day. You have some people who will say he was a good man, and then say, but really, honestly, that argument really isn't sufficient. Either he is what he says he was, or he was a raving lunatic. The Gospel of John actually makes that pretty clear. Either Jesus is what he says he was, or he was a raving lunatic, and no one should listen to him. But that argument was already starting back in his own day. Now, the other Gospels don't really mention that. We don't really get a sense of we don't really get a full sense of kind of the debate that was happening amongst the people in the other Gospels. We hear about the controversy that Jesus had with the leaders, the authorities, but we don't really get a sense of the controversy that was building amongst the people. The other Gospels kind of make it seem like the crowds were unanimously on Jesus' side, and the authorities and the chief priests and the elders and the teachers of the law and all of them were just after him because they were jealous of him. And they were, like that was certainly part of it, but John makes it clear that there was actual widespread disagreement about him, even amongst the people. Some people did believe him. Some were his followers, like some actually did follow him. Some did not necessarily follow him, but were willing to listen to him, and some just thought, he's a deceiver, or he's demon-possessed, he's raving mad. And again, these are the same responses people have to Jesus today. And John makes it clear that they were already responding to him that way in his own day. Because again, if Jesus isn't who he's not a good man if he isn't what he says he is. He's insane. If Jesus is not what he claims to be, then he is a raving lunatic and nobody should listen to him.